Coming up on UGTV. A special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
David.
Joe, Mr. Connor, did you say the mayor is on? Okay.
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, good evening. We are going to call to order our most recent in our continuing budget workshops, and I will call the meeting to order and have the clerk announce the meeting and call the roll.
Roll call. Alvey?
Here.
Philbrook?
Here.
Walters?
Here.
Markley?
Here.
Kane?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Murguia?
Here.
McKiernan?
Here.
Townsend?
Here.
Burrows?
Here.
Bynum?
Here. It is our third budget workshop, and we will let our County Administrator Doug Bach lead us through these items on tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So tonight we have several items to walk through this evening. We're going to, the first item is on the dedicated sales tax projects, and that's one the commission had asked information about, and it was timely to get this information back. We have that at the first part of our agenda. Then we're going to go through our CMIP update. With that, we will talk about the differences we have between what was presented to you in May and you worked through, and then what I ultimately had to build into the proposed budget. We're going to walk through our street preservation program, which you all funded last year. Specific requests on the K7 and parallel project, where we are with the Western Fire Station and the timeline of projects that what we've done since that project has been started. And then also we're going to get into the county PVC debt projection directly as that relates back to the juvenile project. And then other items on the agenda tonight are about our building security and then the Kaw River levy. So the first item on tonight's agenda is that about the dedicated sales tax project. So I'm going to turn this over to Alan House, our Chief Knowledge Officer, and Jeff Fisher with Public Works, and let them walk through how we have everything available for the public to look at and view projects. Alan?
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Keep this brief, but wanted to make you aware and the public aware of information that's available on the UG website at wicokck.org that has information about the sales tax, the projects that were that the funds were utilized, and more broadly, you know, the third distribution approach for the sales tax. So if you go to the wicokck.org, right on the front page, you'll see investing in our future. And that takes you to a landing page there. You can click through for more information on how the sales tax benefits residents. This takes you to a microsite that we put together that has a lot of information about the sales tax and the renewal, when that vote is coming up on August 7th. And if you scroll down a little bit further, it's got information, including the sales tax, a presentation about the sales tax. It's got information on the citizen survey. You can find your polling location and more detailed information as well. We'll click through to the sales tax project map there. And what this will do is take you to an interactive, what we call a story map, that has information on the neighborhood improvement projects that were funded by the dedicated sales tax. If you scroll down through there, it will take you again to an interactive map. If you hold there, you can click on the stars and it will actually bring up information on a specific project. It'll tell you the project type, it'll tell you the name, it'll tell you the amount that was funded, the portion of it that was funded by sales tax, and it'll tell you the total amount for that project if there was funds above and beyond the sales tax that was used for it. And then we've broken that down on a district by district basis as you scroll further down through this story map. We've given you in a map view, and then below that is the table view of the information for that specific district. So we're trying to make this an easy, accessible information that is available to residents across the community. And again, it's right from the front page of the UG home site or webpage at wicokck.org. Jeff?
Well, I just want to add that this is a really nice tool. There's a long list of projects that the UG has committed to over the years using the sales tax. It's great information. You can see examples of resurfacing, NSRP, the CNIP, and again, just a big commitment from the UG over the years. I think going forward, this will be great information too. I think the accessibility for the public is huge. Yeah, I'll take any questions about projects if you have any.
Questions? Comments? Thank you. I appreciate all the detailed information. It's good to be able to show in the districts what the sales tax has helped to pay for. Anyone else? All right. We'll move on.
Okay, we're having a little bit of a difficulty with our presentation this evening as far as what we have to put up on the screen. I think you all either have a hard copy or electronic copy, which you're probably gonna have to follow through with on the next couple sections, but we can't get the, next part of the presentation's not gonna be on screen, so Reggie, you're just gonna have to present it and be very detailed in what you're talking about, and hopefully we'll get this up here in a few moments. So the next part is about the CMIP modifications from the May special session. This was a specific point that came across that as I go through and try to build a balanced budget and work through things from debt, cash, and such like that, ultimately end up making some tweaks or changes from what we had in the May timeframe to where we end up by the 1st of July. So with that, we want to make it very clear to you what areas we've changed or modified. So I'm going to turn this over to Reginald Lindsay, and he's going to walk through those changes which are in your package.
The first set of projects that I'm going to start walking through are the debt finance projects. How the layout is put together is on the top of the grid, we have the May preview of what we covered with you on May 17th, and then also what was in the proposed budget document. Then as we move across the page, we have the particular CMIP project that it is, and then the page number that it is in the proposed document, and then the rest of it is the schedule for the CMIP, the 5-year schedule. So the first one that we have is the new animal facility. It was not in the budget when we came to you May 17th, but it is within the budget in the proposed document. We have it in 2 different places. It was an $8.6 million budget, and what we've done is we split it in between debt and also in between a grant. So it's $4.3 million within debt and $4.3 million within the grant section. The next one is the Public Building Commission, and this is where we have the juvenile facility. We can see the change there, which is in the light blue, is a $2.7 million that we added. That was not in the 2017 or when we met with you on May 2000 or on May 17th. The next project is the Northeast Patrol Station. That was not in the budget when we met with you on May 17th, but it is within the proposed budget document at $2.5 million. The next set of projects that I'm going to cover are cash finance projects, and the first set are within the City General Fund.
Reggie, just one moment. We have a question from Commissioner Markley.
Okay.
Really just a clarification, and particularly since it wasn't up in the screen in the moment, when you say like the animal services facility is in the budget, it's not in this year's budget.
No, it's not in this year's budget, but it is.
I just thought, particularly since the public couldn't see it, that could be very confusing. They could be thinking we're spending $4 million in this year's budget, and it's showing in an out year.
Yeah, it's in the capital schedule within 2023.
And same thing with Northeast Police Station. So now they'll be able to see it, so it's not as critical. But
So you'll give us time to plan on how we're going to get that money. Time to raise some money, is that?
Thank you for the clarification. Commissioner Welters.
I remember a couple months ago when we had the presentation on the new animal service facility, and I really thought they missed the mark completely. And I thought we had a more immediate need than 8 or 5 years or 6 years from now or 7 years from now. And my takeaway was that we needed to send them back and do a more meaningful look at the situation. So I guess my question is, did we decide to adopt their recommendations and go with an $8.6 million new building? And is that why it's in the CMIP?
No, I put it in there as a placeholder, knowing that we have a future need for this project. Could have put it under unfunded facilities. Here I put it, so part of it was in CMIP, and then the rest of it's in other funding, which would mean some type of grant funding or other source that would need to come into play. So there's really 4.3 that would be there as a future placeholder, but the other 4.3 would have to come from other source if we were to do it this way. Put it 5 years out, so it gives us an opportunity to work through, rework it, or not. And that's a lot of times we have projects, same thing with the Northeast Patrol Station, it's 4 years out. However, that's listed down there under special revenue projects, assuming there could be some other type of funding source that could come in to help leverage that project and make it work as well.
Well, I did come away with the understanding that we had a more immediate need to do something with animal control. This indicates that we're really not going to do anything for 5 years. Would that be correct?
Well, I did put a couple $100,000 that we're putting in the facility now for some modifications on the facility to move us through. But as far as a big capital project, we don't have another alternative built yet.
Okay, please continue.
All right. And since we have it up on the screen now, just kind of touch on some of the things I talked about with the grid. First thing we have is the preview from May, and then also what's in the actual proposed documents. That's what you have in these lines here. And then the actual projects, and then the page number that it's on, and then the blue shows where we have the changes at. So and that's would be these areas there. So I'm going to move over to the cash projects. Where we have the change here for in the city general fund with under the fire department, we have where we change the budget from May 17th from $145,000 to $100,000. And then in the police department, major police facility improvements, we dropped it $50,000 from $100,000 in 2019. And then police headquarters flooring replacement, there was $17,000 there. We took that out. And then as we move into the health department, there was $50,000 in 2019 for health department improvements. We had to make room for a electronic medical records software purchase that's going to happen there. That's $295,000. So that's why we took that $50,000 out. And then within tourism fund for parks and recreation, we added $20,000 for Call Point Walkway.
Commissioner
Mr. Bynum.
Mayor and then Commissioner McKiernan.
The question I would have is the reasons for pulling that money out of the fire department and the police department, and where is that money being transferred to? And what's the basis of the priorities?
Probably one difficult thing, Mayor, in looking through this as a snapshot, I mean, this is cash finance projects. So now we're taking a comparison against all $160, $70 million worth of general fund dollars. So there's a point when we go through this budget that I'm going through every one of the departments and figuring out what we can do in order to build a balanced budget. By this, we're just looking at just the projects. Other ones we went after operational areas, look at various things when I go through. So the priority was, how do I build a balanced budget? And I moved some from all different areas within all departments in order to make that happen. By percentage basis of what these departments' budgets are, this is probably a relatively low percentage compared to what happened to some other areas.
So I guess my question would be then, we are accommodating other expenditures. What are the other expenditures we're accommodating by transferring these funds over, or these expenditures?
Continuing to do the operations as we've been doing in the previous years. I mean, I don't want to be flippant to that point, but there's not a specific one thing that we came through and said, gosh, I need this. It was, we go back to them and say, okay, I need to hit a bottom line budget. Where can I go back through from a priority perspective in order to continue doing what we're doing? Or, you know, I mean, as we've gone through this, it's not like we added a lot of money into our, I guess you can look at some of those. We added some money into mowing or boarding up of structures or something like that. but there was very few areas that we added to. Some of these, within these own departments, it may have been just increasing costs to cover from their ammunition or renovations and other facilities they had. A lot of times we tried to budget them back, build them back to targets I had within each specific department. And by doing that, we looked at what were the highest priorities within each area.
Thank you.
Commissioner McKiernan.
I'm sorry, Reggie, I'm going to take you back to debt financed for just a moment. My apologies if this question was asked and answered and I was looking at a different part of the spreadsheet. Line 8690, juvenile facility, jail. We've added $2.7 million in 2019. Is that to fund the overage that they brought to us?
Yes, sir.
No? So we're budgeting for the overage when they told us the other night that we could get back down to our original proposal. All right, I'm gonna let that go for now, but I'll go back on the record and say we agreed to build that project because we had savings from farming out. And now we're budgeting extra, which I would think, unless I'm mistaken, would exceed the savings from farming out.
Commissioner, this is how I have it proposed. We are going to go into that in great detail this evening. Okay.
Okay.
So the next set of projects I'm going to go through are the dedicated sales tax, neighborhood ADA pedestrian handicap ramps. We did have a change there where when we came to you on May 17th, we had $50,000, and we did pull $50,000 out of the dedicated sales tax. We do have $800,000 within the debt budget for ADA, so there will be some funding there from it. It's not new, but there is $800,000 a year there. And then also Holiday Drive reconstruction design. We dropped it $50,000 from $200,000 to $150,000. And then the Metropolitan Bikeway improvement was $250,000, and it was dropped $250,000, but we do have money there in debt.
Mr. Lindsay, if we could stop and have a question on Holiday Drive. Commissioner Markley.
So my understanding is that project is going to start within the next couple of weeks and be done in September or October. So how are we not going to pay for it? I'm just trying to figure out what what we're not paying for, or whether that's a different Holiday Drive project.
There's actually two phases to the Holiday Drive reconstruction. The first one we're funding out of the 2018 dollars of the regular 200,000. That'll be the reconstruction. The 150, we got a new estimate on the monitoring system that we're going to put in, and that'll be what's used in next year's budget, the 150,000.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to pick back up with the Metropolitan Bikeway improvement. It was being funded out of the dedicated sales tax for $250,000. It's actually moved to another fund where there'll be with $250,000. It's not in your document today, but we are producing new pages where that will show up. Also, the sidewalk gap program did not have $175,000 in the dedicated sales tax when we met with you on May 17th, and it does now. And then the neighborhood curb and sidewalk repair, we decreased it $25,000 from $125,000 to $100,000. And the neighborhood street and highway, we decreased it $100,000 from $925,000 to $825,000. Within the community development block grant, we're funding the neighborhood revitalization strategy area from there. And only change there was we consolidated the project. None of the dollar amounts changed. It was a $780,000 project, and we consolidated the dollar amounts from when we first met with you on May 17th to what's in the budget document. And this last page is adjustments to the proposed budget document. There were a few things that we had to adjust there where they came out in the original budget document there where you'll get new pages. So the Hutton and Leavenworth Road intersection reconstruction project, well, we missed some zeros on it. So it goes up in 2020, 2021, and 2022. And then also the State Avenue Village West Parkway interchange improvements. We're pulling that out of the budget. So.
Okay.
All right, that concludes our changes for modifications to what we had, and hopefully that is very clear to you, and you'll be able to see the budget pages. If you have questions to it, we can go from there. Sure.
Okay, so just for information here, on the State Avenue and Village West Parkway improvements, are you pulling it out because the state's not moving forward with theirs? Is that basically why?
There's a couple different reasons, but that's one of them. The other one is we applied for another grant through the Mid-America Regional Council, and unfortunately we just didn't score high enough in that one to get the funding that we needed to move forward.
Okay.
So we decided to pull it this time. We will be reevaluating other potential solutions to some of the issues it has that are a more cost-effective manner.
Thank you.
All right, our next, if there are no further questions on that section, our next section is on the street preservation program. This is a program that our Public Works Director came in and put in as a new initiative to put forth, and you were good enough to fund it for us to move forward. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Fisher and let him start the presentation.
Thank you. We've had a few conversations over the last year and a half about street preservation, about doing things differently with street maintenance and preservation. Now we have a new baseline. We have really good data, and we're going to hit a couple of highlights in that here in a minute. I think we'd all agree the importance of a transportation system really at the end of the day is to improve that economic vitality and quality of life for our community. It is also about safe and efficient movement of people and goods. And our primary objective with street preservation is really simple. Get the most life out of the asset for the fewest dollars. And then also, obviously, the UG is always interested in improving customer satisfaction. Next slide. And then I should mention those last two surveys, community surveys, that was the community's most important. They thought we needed to place the most emphasis on street maintenance by far. So to highlight how we got here, late 16, early 17, staff started talking about, what are those systems that we're using to determine needs and to strategically invest in street preservation. Early 17, well, we identified we really needed data. And so early 17, that data collection effort was funded. In September, IMS was contracted by the UG for data collection with their mobile unit. That work was completed in April. And then in early July, staff started receiving information from IMS, particularly and initially the pavement condition index ratings. So we're going to highlight that real quick. And then in September, we'll follow up with standing committee with a little more detail and additional data like curb condition ratings, so that'll be interesting, and then be able to forecast needs multiple years out. This is, I thought it was an interesting slide. The pie chart came directly from the IMS report. They've estimated the UG's street system at just slightly over $1 billion in value. And I think a couple of noteworthy items are the CNG, the curb and gutter and drainage is 13% of that, and subgrade and base at 31%. And I think that kind of tells me, our focus maybe should shift a little bit to protecting. We talk a lot about pavement conditions. We don't talk about how drainage can affect the road. I mean, staff knows that drainage and pavement integrity are it. That's how we manage pavement, right? But but we haven't been allocating dollars deliberately towards drainage. And so how do we think about that differently going forward? So I'll let Brandon highlight the next few slides, and then we'll talk about some conclusions.
Good evening, Commissioners. As anybody who's been around the pavement world long enough knows, I've heard the acronym PCI, which stands for Pavement Condition Index. That's one of the key factors of how your quality of pavement or your roads are rated. The graph that we have on screen here, excuse me, shows our network PCI. What you can see here is that our network PCI is rated at 56. This is below the national average of 60 to 65. And also, the other wordage you see or verbiage you see up here is backlog percentage. When most people hear backlog, they think of just work that's sitting on the back burner. That's not the case here. Backlog in this instance means that there's the amount of roads that we have that are below a 40 MPCI, which means there's no more treatment methods you can do to them other than really a reconstruction. Those are the ones you see over here on the far left of our graph, these last two bars. While it does look impressive that we're only at 8% and they're rather small, the next two bars that you see are very large. In fact, that's 63% of our network is in these two ranges, which have a very fast tendency of falling off the edge to where the only thing you can do is rebuild them. So it can get very costly very quickly if we don't look at managing these in an appropriate way. Another good way that a lot of companies look at, or a lot of industry people look at the value of a network or the grading of a network is the percent excellent, which is the percentage of your roads above an 85. As you can see, we're right over here. We're currently sitting at a 6.5%, which is a little bit below where they like to see at 15, but we're getting there. We've made some vast improvements in our arterials over the last couple of years, giving some of our larger capital projects. And we've also made a concerted effort in our neighborhoods over the past few years with allocating more money to our neighborhood street resurfacing program.
I think, if I might add, that information is straight from IMS, which is the UG's third-party data collection partner. And also, staff pointed out earlier today, this seems to correlate very well with the customer satisfaction survey, and that they're concerned with street maintenance and that there needs to be a lot of emphasis on that.
The next slide we're bringing up shows you just some of the regional comparisons, some of our cities around the area on what they spend per year for pavement maintenance and what their lane mile is that they maintain. The first number you see up here and in the first gray bar is the UG. We spend approximately $4 million a year on our pavement maintenance, and we maintain 2,400 lane miles. Comparatively, you can see some of our other partners in the area with the gray bars, significantly less lane miles, but take Overland Park, for instance, 1,900 lane miles. Their budget's $13.75 million annually on their pavement preservation alone. You can see that trend follow along through the rest of the graph and through the rest of the numbers. If you look at the red diamonds that are on the graph, those are what the pavement budgets are. So you can see ours down here in this little, in this area. We're consistent with these cities that maintain between 400 to 650 miles of road. We're 6 times that size at a fourth of the budget, at least. There's just some things to consider as we're moving forward into our future budget cycles. We wanted to show this information in also a little bit of a different way, and that is dollars spent per lane mile. So again, you see the UG in our first bar over here, sitting here at $1,600-ish per year per lane mile if we were to allocate everything across the board. Some of our other cities around the area are spending upwards of around $7,000 to $13,000 a year on their roads. Big discrepancy again, but what it gets you, as you can see in the little diamonds that are on the screen, is our PCI ratings. So you see our PCI down here at 56. Some of these others are well above that in the close to 80 range. So it's just something to keep in mind as we start looking at how much or what do we want our roads to really look like, and how much are we willing to put forth an effort into that. It's going to take some work, and we know that, but as we crunch this data a little further, we'll be able to get some more finite numbers and program these dollars out, showing you what we'll actually be able to touch each year with different kinds of programs.
We have a question here, Commissioner Burrows.
Sure. Your numbers, the numbers that you're showing, does that include curbs, or is that just the pavement itself?
That is just the pavement itself.
And in many parts of our community, we have no curbs or sidewalks, so that is why we're probably getting more lane miles for pavement than we're investing, or is it just a thin overlay?
Typically, our treatment method has been a 2-inch mill and overlay for at least the past 10 years. That's really what we've done. Before that, there were some other treatments that the UG did internally that has gone to pass, and we don't do those anymore internally. We're looking at getting back to that internally, as well as third party in that out through our bid process. But the curb issue is actually something we haven't really begun to address until this year, as far as replacing curb with our mill and overlay programs. We've always done, well, I shouldn't say always, since 2011 we've done the ADA ramps, but that's because we were mandated to do that by our consent decree. But curbs themselves haven't been something we've addressed until this year. This year alone, we're replacing about 25,000 feet of curb with our mill and overlay program.
Go ahead.
Do the other communities that you've shown here, do they do the curbs and concrete intersections as well as the mill overlay all at one time when they do their street projects?
Most of these cities actually have a concrete repair program as well as a pavement repair program or an asphalt repair program. A lot of cities do concrete intersections themselves as their own piece of the pie, because they do take such a different kind of wear and tear as opposed to this driving street itself.
I think the big difference between at least a few of those cities and the UG is that Overland Park, for example, they believe in chip seal. They've been using chip seal for a long time, and you can see the results. So this is really about outcomes. You know, what you spend versus what the outcome is. And then Olathe will never use chip seal. Their community has decided not to. Did that a long time ago. They use a different product that's very effective, and their outcome is very effective, right? Lee Summit's a very mature street preservation program. So the three, Overland Park, Olathe, and Lee Summit, are mature street preservation programs. They're very good at it. They all use different methods, and that's what we want to model after. You know, there is a need for chip seal. There is a need for microsurfacing. Another technique called UBOS. We plan to use all of those, just using different criteria to determine which one is best, and condition ratings.
Commissioner Murguia.
How many miles of road did you say we have?
2,400.
2,400 is the number lane. That's lane miles. We're at about 1,100 center line miles.
So I like the way you're approaching the road issue. I think it's a good idea, and I think we'll see some improvements. And I don't want to add to your burden or anything, but I just know in my district, and I suspect probably Commissioner McKiernan's district, and I don't know about the other urban commissioners, but I have several feet of road in random places that lead to one house, and typically that house is boarded up and not occupied or abandoned or whatever. Or sometimes I will have a resident that lives at the end of a very long road. If they're, it might be less expensive than redoing those roads is to take a look at the urban area and where the parcels sit at and how we can eliminate some of the road we need to maintain. And then it's not only roads like that. I'll give you one example. The street department has a terrible time getting their large sanding trucks and their snowplow equipment up a hill. I want to say it's 13th Street. It's made of brick, and it's so steep that the trucks can't make it up to the top to plow the street. There's only 3 houses at the top of that hill, and prior to that, there are no houses. So it seems like there'd be a more practical, long-term solution if we can't. And then when I asked to have it overlaid, it's not going to do any good because the steepness of the hill is too steep, and you're not going to be able to get up it anyway. Mm-hmm. So that might seem like an isolated incident, but I'd be glad to, on my own, because I know you're busy enough, provide you with a number of streets where if you could eliminate those, I think that would be helpful.
Right, I think we could certainly consider eliminating streets. Also, generally speaking, if it's a low-level service road and it doesn't make any sense to eliminate it, that would be a chip seal candidate in my view. We have a lot of dead ends or cul-de-sacs, you know, with a handful of houses that go low traffic. Those certainly, as long as the pavement conditions warrant it, would be chip seal candidates to me. And then a little bit higher level ADT, you know, volume, higher level of service, then you get into microsurfacing, and then even higher than what I mentioned earlier was a UBOS candidate. Those are some rough criteria points to.
Okay. Well, if you want my help, I'd be glad to provide those to you, because I get complaints all the time and there's nothing we can do about it. If you can't get the truck up there, the plow up there, right, regardless, you're never gonna, you know, but they say we pay taxes and we deserve snow removal.
Sure.
I don't know what the solution is.
We're starting to be much more progressive in our ways of thinking about treating things like this. So issues like that have come up in the past that have historically been, there's nothing we can do. Well, we're finding ways to do things now, whether it be through a different treatment, whether it be potential, you know, buying of land that is adjacent to it that's not as inaccessible. There's avenues we can look at that potentially come up with some solutions.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Commissioner McKiernan.
I just want to echo Commissioner McGee and say I love this data-driven approach, but it does seem like lane miles per like square area, us compared to Overland Park, I don't know, we seem to have a high number of lane miles per square area. And is that a function of being an urban community with a lot of old, closely packed neighborhoods? Is it a function of something else? And it's not necessarily something we need to get in here, but I guess to kind of echo Commissioner McGee's question, are we maintaining lane miles that aren't in productive use for us? Because it sure seems like we've got a lot of lane miles compared to other communities in the metro. And Overland Park, in North Overland Park, I mean, that's an older, more urban type neighborhood setting. So it would seem to me they have quite a grid of streets. So just something that at some point down the road I'd love to follow up and learn more about.
Well, county administrator brought that up earlier. We're a county-size system, right? This is a county-size system, 2,400 lane miles, and there's no revenues from the county, like in other counties where you got cities with smaller systems and then a county that's taking care of the rural routes, right? It's a little bit different in that way. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Bynum?
Please, Mayor.
Yes, so part, I think, the problem we're facing is that we do have an older road system, and it has not been maintained perhaps to the level it needed to be over the years, and so it's just bringing additional burdens upon the entire budget.
That's actually really correct, Mayor. There's actually twofold to that. The fact that our network system in town or on the eastern side was developed so long ago and has seen some turnover that hasn't been fully taken advantage of. But also you have to look at some of the western roads that were built to old county standards and have just been overlaid, that haven't been really rebuilt properly and aren't holding up to what we would classify as a standard road. We recently actually just went out and looked at a neighborhood that was built less than 12 years ago, and there's 4 inches of asphalt built on dirt. We actually stuck a piece of surveying equipment down almost 12 inches and did not hit anything solid past that 4 inches. So we are exploring multiple options. One Jeff will kind of touch on in a minute, but I'm going to steal his thunder a little bit, is we're looking at going out and starting to do street cores for some of our roads that we're seeing base failures or seeing other potential issues in. That way we can really figure out what the road's made out of and figure out what our best course of action is for repairing it or resurfacing it.
So it was not just the western, it was any probably of the township roads. I know the street I grew up on, it was, and then it was tar and gravel, and then it was just overlaid when the city took over. So there really is no base, and anytime the mill and overlay happens, it really doesn't last that long.
Absolutely. That's some of the information that we're getting out of this first slide, or this slide right here with our network rating on it. When we're doing a little more analysis on these 40 to 60s, these two big bars, we're going to have the company break that down into much smaller segments. That way we can see where those really lie and see if there's the largest disparity of them in the lower category that could be beyond really anything already once we figure out what kind of base there is, or see what else we can really do. But you're absolutely correct.
Particularly if the drainage system isn't working well. If we're not moving water through the system alongside the roads effectively, if it's ponding, getting into the subgrade, that just makes it worse.
Yep, that's right. Okay.
Great.
Okay, well, we haven't been waiting on the data to start making change, right? We've purchased the pothole patchers. One has been in operations, one is going to be in operations in September, October. We've got a curb and gutter replacement repair as a part of our neighborhood. So they mentioned it earlier. Before, we were doing very limited curb replacement in our preservation program and our street resurfacing. Now we're doing much more of that starting this year. We've got an internal curb repair crew, handles that 10 to 50 foot segment kind of size projects. We're using different surface treatments starting this year. The microsurfacing in particular. Next year we plan on doing some chip seal in certain areas. We've updated the right-of-way code and enforcement of the right-of-way regarding these street repairs, and mentioned earlier coring the streets, and then we've added additional training for staff, particularly inspectors and the personnel involved with street preservation. So now, the important thing is we have really good data. We can make good decisions going forward, multiple years out. And then part of the approach going forward that I'm recommending to the county administrator is that best first approach, which is we haven't figured out how we're going to do that exactly. We probably know more in September, like I mentioned earlier. Using that microsurfacing, that chip seal, those types of treatments, the U-Boss for the next 3 to 5 years real heavily. Get those good streets, protect those good streets. We get 5 to 10 years out of those streets, and we can kind of come back and start looking at those more serious issues. And then ask staff to work with finance to see if we can use 10-year bonds. 10-year bonds, or some version of that, would allow us to spend that money on street, the surface applications. Right now, under a 20-year bond, we can't do microsurfacing or chip seal because you can't get 20 years out of it. So if we can use 10 years or some accounting standard, then we can do more of that, and in the next 3 to 5 years really make a dent in it. And then a ditching program. I mentioned the drainage, making sure these ditches, there's nothing wrong with most of the ditches, it just needs to be maintained properly. And if we can help folks, if we can shape them so that they're very effective and easy for folks to maintain, that would be ideal until curb and gutter, if ever, is added. And then reinstituted an in-house crack seal program. Crack sealing is one of the best uses of money in a street preservation program, and we have got to get back to that and get real serious about it. And so we're renting a machine this year for staff to get trained up on. Next year we'll do the same. And then maybe in year 3, we're buying crack seal machines that we're using in-house.
Okay, and Commissioner Philbrook.
So I know I've looked at some of your areas that you put crack sealant on. I'm watching because I'm just waiting to see how well it works. And I'll ask you some other time about the certain locations and how long you expect those locations to work. But having said that, so now that we're doing all that work on Leavenworth Road, you're watching them very closely to make sure they're using all the appropriate drainage, I'm guessing, and the right stuff, and putting down the right base, so we don't have to spend a whole lot more money on replacing that anytime soon?
That's the idea.
Okay, I know, put you on the spot, won't I?
Sure.
Well, no, but it is kind of important, because if we have it done right, then we don't have to put so much money in it again.
Yeah,
and
county engineer.
Part of what you'll see is on projects like Leavenworth Road, those are projects ran by the UG and KDOT as well, in partnership with KDOT and funding, and those are inspected much better than what we've done on residential developments in the past that are built by developers. That's part of what Jeff was talking about, getting inspectors training and finding a way to actually inspect those streets and not just rely upon the developers and their consultant to say, yeah, we built this the right way. So that's where a lot of those issues we've come in with streets that are 10 to 15 years old that have issues, but most of the ones, I say this, I'm gonna get myself in trouble probably, but most of the ones we build, they're inspected properly, and we're much more convinced of what's actually built and how it's built.
So then to follow up with that question would be then, does that mean you guys are gonna be really watching the new development out off of Hutton Road as they redevelop their structure?
That's the goal. That's what we're working towards, finding a way to do that and making it so that we know what's built and have a higher level of confidence in what we have out there.
Oh, cool. So when they take care of the new stuff that's happening at State Avenue and Turner Diagonal, you'll be in there too.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I'll leave you with one thing real quick. PCI right now is 56. The area around us is in the upper 70s. What does the UG want their target PCI to be? We don't have to answer that tonight, but maybe at the standing committee in September we can talk more about that.
I think that's a great idea. Set a target. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Buck.
All right.
So I just have
Oh, yes.
So you said the PCI was 56?
Currently it's 56.
Okay, and you're going to implement this strategy in 19?
Yeah, the bulk of the new strategy will begin in 19.
So at the end of 19, where will our PCI, whatever you called it, be?
We will be able to project that, and that's what we're going to share more about in the standing committee in September and then future discussions. This is preliminary raw data, essentially. So we'll be able to project
You'll be able to give us a projection?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
This is kind of similar to the little exercise that we did back in October and November where I pulled up the website where you could actually choose the different treatments and everything. Because we haven't done the full analysis on our network yet, we don't know what treatments are going to be put out, and we won't be able to figure out what that does to our network rating until we know those. That's what we're hoping to have done this fall and be able to bring back to you with some more data.
But like Brandon said, the program we're getting related to Lucity will help. We can play with the numbers and say, okay, if we have this much funding and we do these treatments, what will that get us? So it should be very beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, guys. I think everybody will look forward to come back and see where we go in September as we build on this strategy of analyzing the data and knowing what we're doing to continue to improve our streets. The next section on this is over the K7 and parallel recommended improvements along with KDOT. One of the things you'll note just in the title that's up here on this one is that it says K7 interim strategies. So I think when we're looking at the K7 area, it's something that has a long-term strategy, gets out there over 20 years or maybe 30. So we're looking at what happens in the next years and what can be done to keep that to be a good road within the metro area. With that, I will turn this over to Troy Shaw, our county engineer.
So where this came from is we're back here to present a little bit about the K7 corridor and more specifically the intersection of K7 and parallel. Excuse me. We brought this to you as one slide in our CMIP presentation in May. It had a slide about the proposed R-cut at K7 and parallel. It's in the budget now, so we really want to give you more information. Commissioner Walters had some questions about it, so we wanted to fill you in and let you know what exactly it is and what all it involves. I also have Carla Anderson, KDOT's traffic engineers here, as well as a couple other representatives from KDOT, Leroy Cohen, who's the district engineer, and Jason Van Nice is the area engineer in KDOT. So just letting you know they're here so they can help us answer questions if there's any in the end relating to the corridor as a whole. So a little bit of history about the K7 corridor. In 2006, KDOT completed a study that basically was looking at the whole corridor and what the ultimate outcome should be for that corridor and how it should all fit together. The final conclusion of that study showed separated interchanges at 1 or 2 mile markers, depending on what type of roads are there at the time. So that being the case, that's obviously an ultimate solution many years down the road, and very expensive to obtain. So based off of that study and moving a little further into the future, they formed the K7 Corridor Committee, and that consists of multiple jurisdictions, cities, counties, including KDOT, that would look at that corridor and figure out, just analyze issues that were with it and try to make it function as one corridor and not individually through every different municipality. In 2015, KDOT completed a subsequent study that really looked more specifically at what we can do interim or for the time being because of some of the safety concerns that are present in the corridor currently, and also for the traffic operations and how traffic flows and is utilized in the corridor. Through this study, there was multiple meetings held that were stakeholder meetings. From what I've heard, I was not in attendance of those. It was before my time, but there was very good turnout from residents and people involved, and KDOT could answer that more specifically if there's questions about it. But where that led to is what they have with, or what's been proposed at K7 in parallel, which is the R-Cut. We've recently received 90% funding for construction to do that R-Cut at that intersection. There's also an opportunity to receive the remaining 10% in another grant for construction that we're in the process of working through right now. So why are we focused on K7 in parallel? As many of you know, there's been many accidents there, some fatalities, a lot of injury accidents. This is just a document from the study from 11 to 13. As we all know, there's been many more since then, and we can get you that data if you would like to see it. But not just the number of accidents, but if you look at the crash rate compared to the rest of the state, it's higher, it's up. There is definitely an issue there that deserves being looked at and seeing if there's a solution to it. So what are we looking to do with that, and what will help with that? As the study was looked at, there's a possibility to reduce the signal phases from 8 phases to 2 phases. That increases the green time and decreases the stop time throughout there if you're only focusing on 2 movements versus 8 movements. So that will help reduce some of the accidents from rear-end collisions. There will not be people sitting there if they're able to move through the intersection. However, you're also reduce the number of conflict points, which I will show in a minute, but first I'm going to give it's a 1-minute video of what an R-Cut is and how it functions. This is from FHWA, and they do a pretty good job of describing it.
We are taking a ride on a synchronized street, also known as a super street, in Holly Springs, North Carolina, just outside Raleigh. It's along the NC 55 bypass at a large development. Because left turns are redirected, you have more green time at the traffic light as you go straight through the intersection on the bypass. This means less waiting time at red lights. By redirecting left turns from side streets, synchronized streets make it much safer to turn onto the main road. You only need to look left for any traffic before turning right onto the bypass. If you want to go the other direction, simply drive a short distance and you'll see a double U-turn area to pull into. After a short wait for the light to turn green, make a U-turn to go to your desired direction. The North Carolina Department of Transportation has been using the synchronized street design for years on congested corridors with high crash rates. The design has shown to reduce crashes and delays.
So like I said, that was just a very quick video. And this is just a diagram of what they showed you in that video and what it looks like in the plan view. Signal in the middle in the main intersection, then 2 additional ones at where the turning is. Those signals are synchronized together, so they work well just like a typical intersection. One can't be green when it's not supposed to be, the other one can't be red when it's not supposed to be. It functions, the way it's set up and the signals are linked together is the same as just a typical intersection. They're just in a different spot. So they're still tied together and they're still coordinated, but this is just an example of what that looks like. And this is a picture of the 2-phase signal. Basically, the greens operate all at the same time and the reds operate all at the same time. Only 2 phases. If you look at the bottom one, there's 2 separate ones, but the bottom one would be a signalized, or signals just like that previous picture. So that's a way of just how the two-phase works and shows, and we can explain that more if you have questions about it. But then the other thing it mentioned was the conflict points. Reducing the number of conflict points reduces the number of accidents. This is a typical intersection. This is very similar to K7 and parallel. There's 40 conflict points that you can have in this intersection, including 24 crossing, which are ones that really lead to the severe injury and fatality accidents. The R-cut, it's missing 2. It's supposed to be 14 because it's missing the 2 merging conflicts that would be at the turn radiuses outside of the diagram, but it's 14 conflict points with 4 crossings. So we're really reducing the conflict points quite a bit, and the data shows that doing that will reduce accidents quite a bit. This is a picture or a sample from 10 states that are using the R-cuts. You can see the data from some of them. I'm not going to read you all of it, but it reduces accidents and it reduces very severe accidents by a long ways based on what's happening. So that's what we're looking for, and I just included a picture at the end. This is from KDOT's study, the ultimate layout of what we're looking for, but that's 30 plus years down the road. So we need something to improve safety now, not just wait for 30 to 40 years to build separated grade interchanges. So that's really all I have. If you have questions, we'd love to answer them.
Feel free to look at any of those other YouTube links that were on there. Some of them discuss a little more about how development builds out around there, whether it be commercial, whether it be residential, and others are just more in depth about how it really works and is more efficient.
Commissioner Kane.
Commissioner Biden.
I want him to go first.
Oh, okay. So Commissioner Walters, and then Mayor Alvey, and then Commissioner Kane.
So we don't have any data newer than 2013?
We do. It's just we were asked to put this together, so I had to use what I got instead of we can go to PD. And
so I see that the
I do have data from 2015 to 2017. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But 2015 to 2017, I do have the data in front of me.
Well, I just saw this a month or two ago, and I think I raised this with the commission at that time. I'm not in favor of this approach, whether it's interim or permanent, and 30 years sounds almost permanent. I see that the crash rate is higher than state average by, what, 15%? Okay. I could make some suggestions on how to lower that if you're interested. The speed limit here is 65 miles an hour. You could lower that. A stoplight at a 65 mile an hour road is somewhat problematic. We have intersections here in our city where you have limited sight distance. We put up additional signage. In some cases, we have flashing lights, signal ahead. I understand a lot of these accidents are rear enders, inattentive drivers, or high rate of speed. Something is causing people to have problems at this intersection, and I don't see that the state or the city has done anything to try to address that other than try to propose this project. So onto this project itself, I'm looking for a way to save the state some money and us too, and eliminating this project I think would be a great way to start. I think it's a major inconvenience for our citizens. As if you could flip back to the diagram showing what's proposed, just imagine on this diagram, west is to the top, I think. So if you're going on west on parallel from the bottom of the screen and you want to go straight through the intersection, you stop at the stoplight at K7, you turn right, you hit another stoplight where you're trying to make a U-turn, then you proceed through your U-turn, you hit another stoplight when you come back to parallel. So you go through 3 stoplights, and all you're trying to do is go through the intersection. So that's a major inconvenience for our citizens that are in this area. And if the idea is to increase or decrease the amount of time that it takes to get from point A to point B, which I understand the state is interested in, and increase safety. I think there are other better ways to do this. So my proposal is that we not proceed with this project. We notify the state that we're not interested in proceeding with this project, and that we take it out of our CMIP budget. So I yield to Mr. Kane.
The mayor first, please.
Oh, the mayor, excuse me.
Mayor Alvey?
Yes, first of all, I want to appreciate the fact that that you have outlined the process that KDOT has engaged to bring this proposal forward. And it seems to me that on several accounts, this is the best solution for an interim. Obviously, 30 years is a long time, and the ultimate solution would be a diamond interchange. But in the interim, in the interest of safety, I think that I would suggest that we continue to move forward with this project. KDOT has done due diligence to try and arrive at a solution that is, first of all, cost effective and most importantly, safety conscious. And I do understand Commissioner Walter's concerns that this is an inconvenience, but I would suggest that, as I tell my kids, 1 or 2 minutes of time is not a trade-off for one's life or someone else's life.
Thank you. Commissioner Kane?
Well, Mayor, I wish you were here, because this would be the first time I've disagreed with you since you've been mayor. And I'm with Commissioner Walters. I attended those meetings, the K7 corridor meetings. They not one time ever mentioned that. And I drove there yesterday. It's kind of lopsided, you know, and I don't see the advantage of this at all. You know, you go down to Osceola Cheese, and you make the flip down there, and you damn near get creamed while you're down there. You know, and these folks are traveling at high speeds, and I think that awareness would be better than wasting a lot of time and money. And I think some of this may take away from the development that could happen out there. And you can't imagine how much traffic is there 2 times a day. And all this is going to do is hinder the traffic. And I know these guys say, you know what, this is the greatest and everything else. I talked to some of my constituents, and they said, do they live out there? I said, I don't know. But one thing I do know, I think this would be a pain for all of us. And it'd be an expense that we don't need to accrue even the state.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. I know it's back and forth to Topeka. We have the rumble strips just prior to getting to the toll booths, as well as there's another road up there that has those also that slows you down, brings to your attention that you're coming into a high traffic area or an area to slow down. Has that been, do you know if KDOT's considered putting kind of a rumble strip in addition to the signage, as was mentioned earlier, signal ahead, intersection ahead, to draw your attention to reducing the speed prior to traffic signal?
No, we would not probably consider rumble strips in a high-speed situation like that for people driving through the signal when they have a green. They're going to have to drive across those rumble strips, and that would cause varying speeds, which could cause more crashes. Rumble strips are typically used for a stop condition all the time. So if you're coming to a stop sign and approaching or slowing down all the time, like for approaching a roundabout. The corridor study studied several things: traditional, adding lanes, and some people call it a continuous flow, which is an indirect left turn design, and then the R-cut. And according to the studies that we've had for a long time, the R-cut is the most beneficial for that location to reduce crashes, reduce conflict points, and to keep the flow of traffic. Since that's a heavy corridor of commuters and driving heavy traffic on K7, which I do drive it, and I attended all the public meetings too, so I have family in Leavenworth, so I'm familiar with the area. But my office, we manage the federal funds for highway safety improvements. And if the city approves, if you all approve to do this, you're getting a big, if not almost all that money for 2021. So this would be a big benefit for you guys
So we have a competitive bid process, and it did weight pretty highly with the amount of money that we've offered.
Commissioner Bynum?
Mayor.
Yes, so perhaps what we need to do is to compare the data that was collected on the other measures that Commissioner Walters suggested to what was proposed today, because I think if it comes down to it, we really have to err on the side of safety, but over inconvenience. And I know that's a difficult trade-off, but again, I'd like to see the stats that the data that was collected from the engineers at KDOT to show that this is in fact superior to the measures recommended by Commissioner Walters.
Thank you. Commissioner Philbrook.
So I was also at a lot of those meetings. And I'm sorry, Mike, I do remember those suggestions of the particular, they came with like 2 or 3 different ones. And part of the discussion came along as that being a corridor between Leavenworth and Johnson County as a major highway that they were using, and they didn't want to hinder the flow of traffic as much as it's been by the all-stop 4 ways type thing. And so they came up, this was one of the things they came up with. And so I know that Leavenworth was really excited about this sort of style. Is that's what I remember anyway from our discussions. Is that kind of accurate? That?
Well, we talked a lot about it and in fact, there's another meeting tomorrow. But at some of those public informationals, one of the things I remember hearing was the public was not interested in having stop signals, stopping conditions, a signal at almost every one of those intersections. And so, yeah, this was an option. You're correct. This was an option that would keep that traffic flowing. And as Troy mentioned, I mean, it reduces the phases to the signal. So you can do a 2-phase signal, which gives the main flow of traffic the go most of the time.
Could I ask another? Maybe we're having a semantics issue, but there's still a stoplight on K7 at this intersection. In fact, you're adding a second stoplight. So, you know, no matter how you signalize it, the north-south traffic gets the priority for the amount of green time now. So I don't know how you're saying that other than eliminating a 15-second left turn signal every 5 minutes for people who are westbound on parallel, I don't see how you're going to make a significant change to what's there now. And in fact, the state just added a signalized intersection to the K7 corridor when you redid the I-70 K7 junction. There are several signalized intersections starting at Kansas Avenue, your new signalized intersections that you just added, the other half of the signalized intersection at I-70, the signalized intersection at 130th Street, and now we pick on this one, and then there are several intersections directly north of this. And I think this is just an interesting overkill for one intersection on this road. And I really dislike the solution and the way that this is going. I think maybe inconvenience is the wrong term if you're trying to measure inconvenience versus safety. I think we can do other things that would improve safety without installing this solution.
So the question that I would like to get clarified is, what budget year is this sitting in?
I was just looking at it. I think it's, and then I passed over it again. It's, I think it's 300,000 in 19 and another 300,000 in 20. But I'm
19 and 20.
I might have the years wrong.
Okay.
It is 19 and 20.
Oh, it is. Okay, so we do need
That's our piece. The rest of it is funded by
state funding. Okay, so yes, Commissioner Kane.
I don't think we have to settle this tonight. I would like to see some of the other options that I saw before, let the entire commission see it than just us. Because obviously two of us are never going to agree to this, but the rest of y'all can, but you need to see the other options too.
Well, isn't this, Commissioner Kane, isn't this in your, isn't it?
I don't want it. It's in my district. You want to vote right now?
Yeah, okay. And
Well, actually, the left side is in my district, the right side is in.
okay.
Well, as long as you two are in agreement.
Well, I would just chime in and say it's also in my district, and I would say that when I sit at the intersection of K7 and Parallel, I am very nervous. It makes me very, very nervous to drive at that intersection of K7 and Parallel, particularly when I'm going west. If I'm going west and I am facing west and I am on Parallel and I'm at K7 and I'm either going to go straight or turn left, I'm a nervous driver. So it causes me concern.
I don't understand that, because you're thinking that there's a 65-mile-an-hour car coming and they won't stop?
That's one possibility, but the other one is that when you are going east on Parallel, coming up to K7, you're on a little hill.
Yeah.
And so if you're not being an attentive driver, you might come through that intersection because you're not paying attention, and you might wipe me out while I'm trying to make my left-hand turn. Just one example.
Okay, well,
But I'm just
applies a dozen times up and down that corridor.
I'm only making my point in regard to the safety of the intersection.
But if we're going to fix one, why don't we fix them all? You know,
Commissioner Bynum.
Well, I think we have to start somewhere. Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, it seems to me that we ought to defer to the engineers at the Kansas Department of Transportation, because in fact, this is their duty, this is their responsibility, this is their training. Otherwise, what would be the point of engaging them? And I understand, it seems to me the data needs to drive this decision, and our personal preferences and our own personal experiences really need to be trumped by the data. And if KDOT can come back with data to show that this is a safer solution than any other measures that might be implemented here, then I really think we ought to defer to that. But I agree with Commissioner Kane that this is probably not the evening where we decide this. I think the data, again, has to drive this. And if we don't defer to the engineers, I don't know who we defer to.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Bach.
So I believe we can look at what data we have, and I don't know if there's available other options that were considered. I remember going to the workshops, seeing these, and I can't remember what else was done when we had those community meetings when we went through them. But if we can maybe bring some of that back in a week, and at least show that to the commission, I mean, there might be a couple of options we have that we can work on to think about as we look at our budget perspective that would allow us to keep something in place as this is evaluated and not have to make a decision on it one way or another. As you're saying, KDOT's really slated for 2021 when the project work would happen?
2020, I believe.
2020?
And we'll have to look at our fiscal year versus KDOT's fiscal year difference, so there may be a...
Okay, that's the difference. All right. So if we can go through that, we'll kind of target it for next week to figure out how we can move this along or not.
Okay, thank you. All right, next is Western Fire Station timeline.
All right, last week at our meeting, as we went over there was a question asked by Commissioner Kane about the Western Fire Station, and specifically asked us to come back and provide a timeline as the work that's taken place on this station. So I'm going to turn this over to Assistant County Administrator Joe Connor and also Acting Fire Chief Jack Andrade, who's been working on this project. Joe?
keep going, no, keep going. Right there, thank you. All right, good evening, Commissioners and Mayor. What I put together with the help of Public Works and the Fire Department was kind of a going back in time and looking at the activities that we undertook. You can move it to the next slide.
You got it right here.
That we undertook to get to the point where we are today. There was a lot of moving parts on this particular thing, and I've tried to summarize it the best that we can. So I'm going to go through each of these activities, and I'm going to first start with the station location exercise that we went through. I'm going to ask Chief Andrade to walk us through that.
Good evening. Coming now are some diagrams that you should be familiar with. In 2017 in February, you guys all looked over of how we picked where the location is at Leavenworth and Hutton Road. And so I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how we picked that location. The GS department prepared an analysis utilizing 3 demand points for the Piper area station. The 3 points they looked at is vacant tracts, vacant subdivided land, and improved land. As you all should recall, the analysis was shared with the commissioners at the beginning of February 2017 that showed 4-minute and 8-minute response time of a single apparatus. Currently in the Piper area, we make that 4-minute response time 34.8% of the time. And adding a station in this location is going to increase it by 32%. So if you have any questions on that packet or information I just gave you, I'll take questions at this time.
So and just to reiterate some of the points that Chief was talking about, there was a team of us working on this, and notably Public Works, Planning, members of the Fire Department, to go through this different exercise. We came to you in an executive session in February and asked for authority to start moving forward on property purchases in that area. The next activity was the property purchase itself. You gave us the authority to move forward with that. We went and hired a real estate agent to represent us as a straw buyer to start, because none of the property that we were targeting was for sale. So we had to start approaching landowners and with the best potential to figure out if they would sell and what would their interests be and things along those lines. We came back to you in June of 2017 in an executive session to recommend the purchase of the ground where the fire station will be built today. That was at that particular point in time, a developer was purchasing the ground from a bank, and we were purchasing the ground from the developer, so we were kind of second in line in the transaction process. The developer was not able to close on his parcel, which is the largest parcel, about 45 acres, until September. Then we could start to move on our part, which we were required to do a lot split because we weren't buying exact parcels. And so that wasn't scheduled till November. And then we executed the close on the closing and making it UG property in December of 2017. During that particular time, we also started down the station design process. And I think as was mentioned last week, the 2 deputy chiefs at the time and myself did attend a station design conference.
When was that?
May of 17. And then the fire department itself was actually going through some other exercises, and I'll let Chief Andrade talk about what they were doing.
During that time, we searched for new stations that were built in the region. Some of those stations are Pleasant Valley, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, Station 39 at 47th and Sterling, Shawnee, station number 72, and then Eudora Fire Station. We've reviewed those stations, and we looked and gathered information, and we met with ARC Images at least a half a dozen times with a committee of individuals from firefighter all the way up to assistant chief of the fire department. And they've been meeting to figure out what would be best suited in the Piper area. So we're looking at how many bunks we should have, how many base stations there should be, how many bathrooms, should there be a training facility or a common area for the community to utilize in that area. And so right now we have a rough idea of what we would like. Now we're just looking at how much it's going to cost versus how much is budgeted. And that will be scaled down to meet the needs of our budget.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. The next activity that we had was an ordinance adoption, and I'm going to let Jeff Fisher talk about that a little bit, but the preferred method that came out of both the conference that was attended and with the juvenile center coming online and also with the staff at the time was the construction manager at risk. And so I'll let Jeff kind of walk through what needed to happen for us as a city to make this happen.
Okay. Chief Jones at the time was very clear that he very much wanted to work with the architect directly. And so that helped form the conclusion that we needed to go CMAR. And so that was, to me, that was Chief Jones' request. I want to work directly with the architect, and because this is kind of the first facility we've built in a while, and I want that. So CMAR was the best. And then along the way, we were also working on the juvenile center, and through that, legal needed to make some updates to the code to set up CMAR for city-funded projects, and we worked real diligently on that and completed that in December. Those are really the components of the CMAR and how we came to that delivery method.
Okay, so at the conclusion of the ordinance adoption then, an RFP was presented or prepared for the architect selection, which was completed in May, and then we followed that up with the bid for the construction manager at risk, which proposals will due for that on August 9th of this year, or of 2018. So that's kind of brought us up to this point. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to speak about what's proposed to happen this year.
Sure. I have spoke with staff. We have a couple of project managers in the engineering division, actually water pollution control. They're going to manage the sewer portion of that project. I believe they've got everything into legal needed to secure a few easements. Barring any issues with that, they will be able to get sewer in the ground this year. They were fairly confident in that. I think starting construction, moving dirt around, something like that before winter sets in has some pros and cons. So I think having the CMAR on board, the construction manager at risk, I don't think we want to make those kinds of decisions until we have that partner on board and helping our architect.
So that kind of brings us to where we are today. So we just, stand for any additional questions.
So did I understand correctly, possible construction to start late this year with a completion date of when?
Well, we would be able to, I think we'd be able to construct the sewer portion of the project that's going to serve this facility and that development around it this year. Moving dirt for the facility itself, I don't think we're ready to determine that yet, and then I don't have a completion date until we have that construction manager at risk on board, helping the architect design it and develop the project approach. I really can't answer those questions.
Okay, Commissioner?
Well, now we went from the fall to the winter. I mean, when we started working on this, And I realized some of this, that we had no control over. But we didn't do anything on it for a while. And I don't know why we would have one person in charge of I want to do this and I want to do that. We're supposed to, we want something built, let's get it built. You know, we voted on it last budget. I would have thought, and obviously it wasn't important to staff because they didn't do anything. But I would have thought by now we'd have moved the dirt, we'd have started working, and we're not. And now we're saying, well, we can build the sewers, which is great. I'm all about that. So somebody give me a time frame. Give me 2019, 2050. Somebody tell me something. We don't have a time frame. We don't think we can get this done in 2019.
Well, I think that what we should be doing from this point on is once the CMR gets on board and the time frame and the bid or the drawing documents are finalized, we come back to the standing committees monthly and provide updates.
That's a good start. That doesn't answer my question. How long does it take to build a fire station? Has anybody called around and asked somebody how long it takes to build a fire station?
I think we can provide that to you, but I guess the fire stations that they looked at, I mean, you may be able to respond to this, Jack, but they're all a little bit different. I know, like in the city of Shawnee, they were required to build a road because of where they were. So that's, it's going to try to compare.
I don't doubt there's some infrastructure issues that we have to get going. No doubt about it. When are we going to start building the fire station?
Well, we'll start it as we start. I mean, the sewer project is the first part of it, and that goes with it. So that's the groundbreaking. I mean, that'll go as we get on the site to run that sewer up to it. And then we'll, at that point is when we'll be knowing where how it's locating. And then I think it's a decision whether or not we actually do the grading of the ground, you know, prior to this winter, or we wait until after the winter. And I think that's a judgment that the engineer makes, right? When they come into it and say.
That's what I was talking about before. The more you push this back, then we're not gonna do anything in the winter. We're gonna sit on it. We're gonna, we might start building into the spring. I haven't got a good answer yet.
Well, I think it's possible we could start before winter. That really will depend on construction manager at risk input on this project. We certainly start construction early in 19. When it's going to be complete, I just can't tell you that right now.
Do we manage our own projects like this?
We will manage this project.
So we don't outsource these to developers?
This cannot be that hard, folks.
Well, we will hire a construction manager. That's where we're out for bid now, Commissioner, if that was your question.
But can somebody, on your updates, Mr. Connor, sir, maybe when we have our standing committee meeting, you come up and say, this guy says, once we get the sewers in, get all that in, it'll take 6 months, or it'll take 8 months, or it'll take 9 months. That's all I'm asking for.
Yes, we will have that. That'll be the time they give us, and it'll be decision-based. Some of that, the variable will be on that based on what kind of fire station we're going to, what we end up with for the actual end product with them, and whether that's a 12-month build or an 18th-month build.
Joe, when you went to class, did they say anything about that?
About length of time?
Yeah.
Not the presentations weren't based on that. It just kind of depended on the part of the country, the weather, what you had to do to it. I mean, there was no.
I would like the exact addresses of the fire stations that they went to see.
Okay.
Jeff, is the reason that these kind of projects take such a long time to get going is because we don't really build a lot of new stuff and we manage them internally, and we don't really do that very often. So we're having to set up a whole group of people to manage a project like this.
Well, the UG had not used CMAR previously, so to the juvenile center, and so it did. Between the fire station and juvenile center, the code had to be set up accordingly. I think in this case, I think what Joe was pointing out was that in this case, the length of time really was dictated by the station location work and then securing the property. That really was the critical path. And then in the meantime, we were setting up CMAR, so that when we were ready, we had the code to support the delivery method.
But what took so long to acquire the property?
It was a piece of property that the developer was trying to buy, and we were buying it from him.
So what took so long?
He was trying to close on his end, and we couldn't close until he closed. And so we were kind of at his mercy. He agreed in principle to sell it to us, but we couldn't move his transaction along any faster. We had to wait for him.
Mr. Connor, when you went to this class or whatever, did they have a presentation that you saw while you were there?
Multiple.
Could we get a couple of them?
What particular would you like to see?
A little bit of everything. Not the entire detail, but something that says, you know, you got to look at this, you got to look at that. And each area is different because each fire department's going to want something different. There's no doubt about it.
Mr. Commissioner, there is a course going on in September 20th and 21st, just north of the river in North Kansas City. It's a day-and-a-half class that anybody can attend. It costs $195 per person.
If I'm not out of town for work, I want to go.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner.
just an observation, and maybe this is symptomatic of other projects that several commissioners have talked about. There's no urgency on this project. We authorized it a year ago, and we've been thinking about it for 13 years. And to sit here today and hear that we still haven't decided exactly what it is we want to build out there is really astounding to me. I would have thought that this was such a priority that when we funded this project a year ago, we would be off to the races. And that's clearly not the case. And I think it's, from what I hear from other commissioners on other projects, it's symptomatic of an issue that I think we need to address. Thank you.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. How long did it take to build the latest station that we built? That one was about 15 years ago, maybe out by the Speedway?
18, 19 years ago.
19 years ago?
19.
And how long and how much did that station cost us?
I'll have to get that for you, Commissioner.
It might give us a semblance as to the exact time frame we're dealing with. I know State Avenue is a major corridor, and we're talking about going to a greenfield and extending sewers out there. But if we're going to build infrastructure, we might as well look at the economic opportunities along that roadway to the fire station. But we have a blueprint in place. That station is one of the nicest stations we have in the community, and this shouldn't take over-engineering to come up with a fire station that meets the needs of the community. We know what size equipment's going to go in the fire station. We know what equipment's going to the fire station. I would think that we could just, as common sense would be determine how many square foot we need, lay it out, get it built, and if we need to make changes as we go along, at least we have a blueprint in which to start from. We have a great footprint out there off State Avenue, and I'm just a little surprised that we can move other projects forward real quick. We can expedite things that come into the community, like maybe a grocery store. We can expedite that pretty quickly, but we're having trouble dealing with the fire station. It deals with very public safety of the people of this community. That's a little concerning.
Other questions, comments on this project? Okay.
As Mr. Connor said, this group will report back to the standing committee every month with the status of where we are and move this along.
I would like to confirm that would be Public Works and Safety Standing Committee?
That will be.
Okay. All right, next is, thank you, gentlemen. Next is the county PBC debt projection with the juvenile project. And who's coming to present on that? Ms. Johnsher.
All right, so this next item is our, as we're going through, we talked specifically about how we were going to do the debt related to how the flow of funds are coming in. And when we brought forward the change or modification to the juvenile facility, it had some, obviously has some impact on our projections for debt. So we put together a couple of graphs that we're going to walk through and show where we're at, and then also how reliant we are upon the transfer of the savings that was all anticipated to be part of this from the where we farm out or no longer farm out our inmates. So with that, I'll turn this over to Debbie Johnsher.
Okay. We'll start with the first graph. As Doug said, we have several graphs showing some different scenarios for the county debt. This is a graph showing the current county debt that has been issued through 2018. And this graph looks different from previous graphs that you've seen, and I'll explain why. So as I said, the debt that you're seeing that we've stacked on here is all of the debt that's up through 2018, and that does include the juvenile center PBC bonds that we issued this year, as well as the additional bonds issued for the improvements to the adult jail. The difference we have here is on the revenue side. Currently, the revenue that's showing here is all revenue, but we have not included the savings from transfer from the county general fund. Currently, the amount that we have budgeted in 2018 and 2019 for that transfer is $1 million. What you don't see on this graph is the transfer that we made. We started making transfers in 2017. We had additional savings in the county general fund, and we transferred $1.5 million, knowing that the full payment of the juvenile center debt was going to come on in 2019. The debt on that bond issue is about $1.7, $1.8 million per year. So that's what this graph shows. It shows that currently, without that transfer, the revenue is significantly below, what we're bringing in is significantly below what the annual debt service on all of the county debt issues is. So this next graph, we've added in the transfer of savings. As I said, in 2018 and 2019, we currently have $1 million budgeted for that transfer. What we've done from 2020 out to 2038, we've budgeted in a transfer of $1.5 million for that transfer each year. If you recall, when we issued the bonds, the revenue source to pay back that debt was going to be the transfer. So we've built that in. We've also assumed in here that the property tax, the increase on the property tax revenue is 2.8%. So that would assume growth each year on the valuations for the property tax revenue. And then the final graph we have here is showing the same scenario, but now we've added on the additional projects that are currently proposed in the 2019 budget. There are three fundings proposed. One of them is the $2.7 million of additional funding for the juvenile facility. There are $3 million in health department building upgrades that are proposed, and then there's an additional $1.3 million for the courthouse roof replacement. Both the juvenile facility and the courthouse roof currently have debt issued on them. These are additional amounts in addition to what's already been issued. The health department is a brand new project. So as you can see in 2019, see if I can get this to show up right here. In 2019, our revenue, we are using fund balance to cover it's about $300,000 of debt would be covered from the current fund balance that we have. Our projection for the fund balance at the end of 2019 is $3.7 million. And so for 2020, 2021, we're still running fairly close, but we are using a little bit of fund balance. When we get to about 2023 is when we start to get ahead. But all that assumes that we maintain that transfer of $1.5 million every year, as well as the additional valuation growth to gain 2.8% of additional revenues to this fund.
Questions, comments? Commissioner Merkley.
So I haven't been as involved in this juvenile facility discussion, but I guess I go back to Commissioner McKiernan's question. Why don't we just tell them they need to do it for less so that we don't have that place in 2019 and 2020 where, am I right? Am I crazy? Where we, where we're above the budget because the amount that we initially budgeted for this is not what they're now proposing.
I agree with that.
Commissioner Philbrook.
I seem to believe that I heard that the gentleman said that he was going to come back with suggestions on reducing that and getting rid of that overage that we're talking about, and I haven't heard anything about that. Am I wrong? Did I hear that? He said it to us. Huh?
Trainer.
Yeah. So, so I
Jeff, can
guess
you comment to that?
he was looking,
I know we
he
had
said he was
some-
looking for ways to reduce that
I think,
cost.
I remember we showed a list of the things that we had already considered, things that we could reduce. But I could be wrong, and I just don't remember
So
having
let me go back.
discussion.
Let me restate. I believe that our intent as the commissioners, and somebody smack me down if I'm wrong, that we really wanted to see the dollar amount that he could reduce and bring that down to where we asked for, and that's the original amount.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
Certainly do that. I can give you an idea of what that'll look like. It'll be cutting down on sort of the quality of things, the facade.
Well, he addressed that, but he said we wanted to know the exact reductions in what, and he said there's a lot of things that they could reduce that wouldn't decrease in the quality of the overall building and safety. Am I wrong?
I remember that we had proposed, we already done that. We provided a list of things that would not be quality associated, and that we had already went from 29 to 27.5. That's what I remember.
Did you put a number with that?
I think there was a list of things, but I also thought that we were clear that we were not happy with it still being over budget. I mean, I think both things occurred. I think they had a list of things they had already reduced, and I think we also said
reduce some more.
Yeah, we can certainly produce a list for sure.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Sheriff is moving
Yes,
forward.
I see that. Come on forward, Sheriff Ash and Commissioner Burrows.
Well, I think some of those projects was the quality of the glass, how they were going to seat the glass in the front of the building, the quality of the flooring. They were talked about changing some of the flooring in the entryway, and those were just a few of the items that were the higher cost items that they thought they could make suggestions on how we could cut back. But I think that's all they were suggestions, and those usually are high dollar items. So, Sheriff, I'm looking forward to hearing what you remember.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think you're correct, and also, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the project is out for bid now. And so it depends on how competitive the bidders, want to be there. And I think Mr. Rowe's thought was, we think that's going to come in under, as the bids come in, we think that's going to come in under. So that roughly $600,000. That being said, you're correct. There were some items that he identified that we could maybe change the spec on. And Jeff, I'm not sure when the bids close. Are you familiar with it?
I'll have to check. We can certainly.
I thought he told me by the end of the month or around the first, by around the 1st of August, but don't quote me on that.
It was really important to get that bid going, just because of the market and the region. So that will be nice to see that. And maybe we're way under. That would be the ideal thing. But we can certainly report back with better information on that.
I think from the bottom line is if the commission is not comfortable with the projection that we're putting forth and we stick with the original number, then the project will be scaled back. When the bids come in, we will be cutting things out of it. And we'll come back and report what project we will have.
Yeah,
So his recent, the best estimate they had at this time when they went through to do it, to say we believe this is what the cost would be. And there's always a variable within it. And thus I wanted to come back and show you based on our current debt flow and based on the savings that the sheriff came in, we talked about what we'd do by building out the pods and such like that. We'd be able to move money over from his budget into this on an annual basis to cover this. And with the savings we have, we're right there. It's not like we have a lot of extra, but there is some money that's put into the fund balance. But I will certainly take your direction if that's the point that we want to cut down on some of the things we have in this, and we'll find a way to make that happen.
Okay, Commissioner Murkia.
Yeah, so I just want to say it's a jail, for God's sakes. So when we got the presentation, yeah, well, I'm not sure it's necessary for someone that's in trouble to see a fountain in the front courtyard. So I would prefer that it's safe and clean and neat, and whether or not they get to gaze out their cell room window and look at a fountain is really irrelevant. I don't think that's really necessary.
Commissioner Murgia, or excuse me, McKiernan.
Thank you. So a couple of thoughts that I have, and the gentleman from Trainer certainly did indicate that he thought that there could be recalculation of the figures to try to get it closer to where we had originally estimated. What I'd like to know, and this is not something we need to provide right now, but I guess soon, what aspects of the project crept? Where did it grow? What's envisioned now that wasn't envisioned as part of the original design thought? Where have we had materials that have increased in cost over what we originally thought about? Where have they changed materials potentially over their initial design thought, where the materials are? Because if we're out for bid right now, it's possible that bid could come in way out of line with even what we're projecting, isn't it? I mean, certainly we could open the bid and find out, oh my goodness, we need a couple of million more.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, we do have all that information. In fact, when we came in the end of June, so I can go back and we can pull some of that information from it, because there's a couple of variables.
Just walk me through it, because
okay.
Again, I appreciate the fact that we're showing that with the transfer and with the savings, that we're in fact getting really close to making that debt payment. But what we're also building it on here is the valuation increase that we're anticipating. So part of it is the transfer of the savings, but part of what's up here is our anticipated valuation increase that eventually covers the gap between our original projection and the new projection. And I don't know, I guess I'm just disappointed, because I had really thought that from the beginning we had envisioned a way to make this happen with our savings, and now we're not. And so we're just looking at adding more debt, and so
the largest cost we had, and Jeff, you probably can pull that percentage, it wasn't an add-on of anything in the facilities. We had some of those, and that's where we came back, and that's what we ultimately issued the bond issue for. When they dug into it deeper, and as this annual cycle construction cycle has gone on, the percentage of increases per cost per square foot for similar facilities is what they came back to us with, and showed us this was going to be a significant increase. And I cannot recall the square footage increase, but I want to say it went up, well, you probably remember what the number is, but that it was the square footage increase by looking at other facilities that had just recently gone out for bid that were comparable to ours, that made them come back and say, you're not going to get it for $24 million. You need to move up. And that's where this change came from. Jeff?
That's right. I think we're in the neighborhood of $50 a square foot increase.
It was dramatic. It was quite a change that, and that a lot of that's due to what's going on in the economy right now. I mean, very strong. There's a lot of big projects going on in the area, and I think some international influences too, I guess, that factor in.
Mr. Bynum?
Mayor?
Yeah, so if going back to the original presentation, I understood, first of all, there were some issues regarding the foundation and needing to do a more robust foundation, but also the cost because of the tariffs on steel and aluminum, that's driving the cost as well. And the only comment I would make in terms of what we might consider to be amenities for this facility, I would like to see the data that shows that, in fact, if we do design a facility for juveniles, in what ways does it need to be different than it might be for adults? Because if we're really looking to prevent juveniles from entering into the system long term as an adult, which will simply increase our costs long term. And if there's simple things we can do in the built environment to ameliorate those situations, I think we need to make those. However, I do understand that this is an additional burden on our budget, but I think we have to take those things into consideration.
And Sheriff, would you say that some of what the mayor brings up might be available in the jail study that we've seen that led us to this project?
Well, I think some of that information be in there, Commissioner. I think it certainly may be. Commissioner McKiernan, you'll recall we really started this about 4 years ago or so, and we were looking at those initial numbers that Trainer and the consultants brought us. Now those numbers are 4 years old. They've been refreshed. And once again, it's much more than just a juvenile detention center. We've got juvenile courts, we've got juvenile court clerk, we've got community corrections, we've got, once again, more of a one-stop shop there. I don't think there are going to be any detainees looking out anywhere and seeing any fountains or, seascapes or landscapes or one thing or another. But so, it's much more than just a juvenile detention center. It includes a juvenile detention, it includes secure detention, but it is consolidating a significant number of functions and employees from the current 812 building are going to be relocated and co-located in there as well. So I think all of those contribute, Commissioner, to probably the creep up of the cost or the expense. I don't think you can pinpoint, to one or two single things. There's a lot of factors there.
Okay. Commissioner Murguia.
How many juveniles do we serve through juvenile court annually?
I couldn't tell you that number. I don't have that number.
Is it, so just very shot in the dark, is it 500 or is it 50?
I'm sure it's closer to 500. We have 26 juveniles in custody today. A week ago, that number was 13, so there's great fluctuation from week to week, from month to month, and nearly all of those that are in juvenile detention for any given amount of time are going to be moving their way through the juvenile court.
Okay, so Sheriff, I'm not opposed to a facility. I'm just where Commissioner Markley and Commissioner McKiernan is, that you've done a fantastic job in running things more efficiently. I have always praised all of your efforts, and your presentations are very clear and concise. It's just that we're under the standing that those savings would be able to pay for this. I hear what Administrator Bach and our staff are saying, is they still think that might be possible. But I would just say, and I'm still in favor, don't be discouraged by this, but I will tell you, it's really difficult when even, let's say there's 1,000 kids that go through this place annually. We're spending $20 million on 1,000 people in a city of 150,000 people. It just, I don't know what to say about that. It just is, we're spending a lot of money on 1,000 people, and we don't even know what that number is. And right now you're telling me it's only 13 people in custody. There were 20-some last.
Vice versa. 26 today. There were 13 a week ago.
I'm just saying it's $20 million we're spending on people that are engaging in criminal activity and it's 1,000 people out of a population of $150,000. And when we look at our budget, and if it cash flows, you've been brilliant at that. I mean that sincerely. I think that's great. But if it doesn't, I would just tell you that if we were to put on the survey and ask the people of Wyandotte County how they wanted to spend $20 million, and we put this juvenile facility on the list along with roads, curbs, sidewalks, grocery stores, those kinds of things, I don't think it'd make the top 5, but I don't know, I'm just guessing. So we got to figure out a way to make it cash flow. Those are just my comments.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Sheriff, you're right. We started this a long time ago. And you're right, the money has no doubt changed since a long time ago when we came up with our first estimate of this. And I completely agree with you that we need to get the children out of the adult jail. It is no place for the children to be. What I just want to know is that we are being the most effective and efficient we can possibly be, and that we're being, and frugal's not the right word, but that we're just being as smart as we can possibly be with the level of finish, with the level of amenity, that we have something that's quality, that enhances our city, but that we are not spending excessively on. And if we can determine that we are being as effective and efficient as possible, and this is the number, then I guess I'll have a decision to make as to whether I support this or not. But I'd love to see us sharpen our pencil just a little bit, or at least help me understand how we are being as effective and efficient as possible.
Just a couple of comments, and we can keep doing what we're doing. And we have seen since 1990 how much the unified government, or the city, or the county first, and then the unified government has spent in those outrageous farm-out costs over that amount of time. You're going to build 2 or 3 of these facilities since 1990. So we can keep doing that. And you can keep spending that money in that way. Or we can do something to permanently fix that situation, which is how this all started and what we started talking about. That we would debt finance over 20 years, much less time than what the county and the unified government have already been spending all of that money out on. And remember, it wasn't that long ago that it was almost $5 million a year. So I think it's important to keep our eyes on the ball and the overall long-term strategic thing that we're trying to do here. And it may be 500 to 1,000 juveniles a year going through that system, but it's every year.
Well, Sheriff, I guess
that's probably not going to stop. So I'm just saying, hopefully we reduce that number. Hopefully we do, because we're able to manage those. Instead of having 26 in custody, we're able to have a lower number actually in custody and a larger number that we're managing in more efficient and effective ways outside of secure detention, which has been a goal of a national goal. It's been a goal of the state, and we have seen where we have reduced the number of youth who are incarcerated versus being managed outside of secure detention. So there are all of those factors as well that are in the backdrop that I think it's important we don't lose sight of those things.
I just want to follow up one more thing, because one of the things that we talked about initially was not only getting the children out of the adult jail, but then recovering that space so that we could, one, improve the flow of adult prisoners into, and I think it's out of the jail is right now where the juveniles are placed, and that we could recover that space for additional housing of adults. Is it theoretically possible that if we don't recover this space, we could be again in a situation where we are farming out adults because space that we could have recovered for housing adults is continuing to be used for housing juveniles?
Sooner than you know. There are some inmates that are farmed out today. It's a small number. It's approximately 25 adult inmates, and we have been having to farm them out now for about the last probably 45 days to 60. Some of that is due to critical reductions in our staffing. So we are housing as many as we can safely house based on the staffing numbers that we have. Unfortunately, those staffing numbers have been going down and not up. And so that continues to be a challenge for us, but working on that, you know, separately. But
we've budgeted those staff numbers. So what you're saying is that we could actually find ourselves that the money that we could recover or save by not farming out could be higher than we originally projected, because we were projecting what we were farming out at that time. And you're saying now that even with all we've done, we are already back in a position of farming out some inmates, and recovering this space could help with that cost.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bynum.
Mayor.
Sheriff Ash, I wonder if you could, I have some experience with the juvenile detention in California, as I volunteered there for several years. And I do know that many of the youths in that facility were not there because of anything that they had done, but in fact because of the neglect or the negligence of their parents. Is that the case with our own facility?
No, sir. We currently manage those youth, which are an additional little over 500 a year, through our juvenile intake and assessment program. So those youth that are technically victims, as you appropriately said, of abuse and neglect, they are not staying in the juvenile detention center. We're managing them through juvenile intake and assessment and fostering them out or putting them in temporary placements till the court decides what to do with them.
Would those youths be processed in this new facility?
There is space included in this facility for juvenile intake and assessment. So that's another one of the functions that we're co-locating over there, because sometimes you have youth that come in, well, all youth that come in, even those that come into the juvenile detention center, are processed by juvenile intake and assessment. And then there's a risk assessment instrument that's completed that determines whether they need to stay in secure detention or whether it's safe for them to be released if we can find an appropriate responsible adult to release them to until their issue is taken up by the court. So all of the youth get assessed by juvenile intake and assessment, including those that are in detention. But the ones that are not there for an offense or a crime, those then are just simply handled by juvenile intake and assessment and released.
Thank you.
So I'm just wondering, to move forward with this, if we can, I think we agree that we want to see what have the consultants bring back where the savings might be to get us as close back to our original authorized number as we possibly can. And that I don't know how soon or how quickly they might be able to come and talk to us, but I think we are definitely on that point as a matter of consensus as far as knowing we had authorized a certain dollar amount for the project.
Well, and we'll be in a position to still work with that. We have, as they said, we bid the project, but you have only authorized what the original bonding amount is. You've not given me authority to spend this additional $2.7 million. So we can come back with scaled down numbers. We can also see what the timing is of the bid numbers to come in. One thing about this is I can think about some different options as far as what could be proposed or what could be built into the budget to have some additional latitude on expenditures based on how the final bids come in, if they come in after our bid date. So there might be a couple of options we have to work with while we're trying to keep this project moving forward. Because I assume we're still doing it in some fashion.
Yes, Commissioner McKiernan.
Just one thing, and in talking with Sheriff Ash here that I hadn't thought of before is that, yes, this is over our original estimate, but if we are hedging the future increase in farm-out costs that are currently unbudgeted, as far as I know, then that certainly colors my thinking about this project. I know it's impossible, it may not be possible to accurately project any future increase in farm-out costs, but if we recover that cost and put it towards this, I think it gets us closer to where I'd like to see it.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, Sheriff, if you would stay there, our next item is our next item is the building security item on the list here, and we may need your comments or expertise. Mr. Bach.
Thank you. Yes, the next item is one that, if we can just go ahead and flip ahead to the next slide here. Somebody have it? Go ahead and hit the next one. So in this year's budget, just a couple of points to note. You know, we have about a $1.5 million operating budget for this. Moved the security, as you recall, earlier this year from buildings over to police. This was a strategic move that, in looking at really the changing times when we were operating buildings and started to bring in some security staff for monitoring things where we were doing. It was appropriate under building operations. That kind of has evolved a great deal over the time. So the security of that fashion changed a lot. So we've moved that under the police department as a whole. However, with that, as has always been the case, the sheriff has primary responsibility for security within the all the court buildings. So there's a shared relationship that the police department, the sheriff department work on in this. In this year's budget, you see I've noted that we have some money in there for some CMIP upgrades to some of our security equipment. We'd look to replace some of the x-ray machines and also to do some camera upgrade and replacement. Now, when I mention that, that's camera equipment that can be downtown. It can be equipment that's at our fleet center or out at the annex. So it's in all our different areas that we have in place. However, as I've continued to have these conversations with the chief and the sheriff, they believe there may be some additional things we need to look at, and I think that's where having them in tonight to let them talk a little bit about some of the things they're looking at. And as noted, we can't go into all kinds of detail about what specific changes we make there. That would be more appropriate in an executive session. But with that, I would turn this over to Chief Ziegler and Sheriff Ash.
Well, since the police department took over the security program, we've been going through and analyzing the operation of that and some of the security measures that are in place at the unified government facilities. But, you know, our focus seems to shift as priorities change. And one of the things that happened last month was the killing of Deputy King and Deputy Rohr. So we've had to shift our focus to over to some measures that we need to take in order to shore up the way we do some of the operation of moving inmates. I don't want to go in the detail in this meeting or in this setting for that, but we believe that we have $150,000 was our target for the CMIPs for security upgrades. We believe that we need about $350,000, so $200,000 more than that in order to take care of those issues. And I don't know if Sheriff Ash would like to say anything regarding that issue or not.
Well, we're analyzing a lot of things in looking at the event that occurred last month. And we are working with various consultants. We have already made some operational, day-to-day operational amendments and changes in the way that we're doing some things that have negligible costs to them, I think, right now, and that we believe we can handle within our current, in our existing budget. But there will be some longer-term things that we'll need to consider, we'll need to look at in order to not only make, the deputies more safe, the inmates more safe, but certainly of equal or more importance is all of the staff people that we have in these various buildings and locations. So we're still collecting data, we're still looking at options, and we're still trying to keep dialogue open with the chief and with county administrator to let them know what we're looking at. But right now we don't have a lot of specifics other than some of those that you're seeing mentioned up there.
Are there comments? Yes, Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. Chief, the 3/8 cent sales tax that's up, does that include the sheriff's department in with the public safety portion of that?
I believe all that goes to the police department. County administrator may be able to speak.
Police, fire,
City sales tax, and it stays over for, unless there's some equipment or something like that that we buy through the police that's shared use, it's primarily for the police department, for public safety.
Sheriff, are you in charge of the courthouse?
Yes. Well,
in reference to?
In terms of the security?
Yes, sir.
By statute. In terms of the security, yes, we're to secure the courts, the judges, and the business of the courts, provide security for hearings and trials.
And I'm sure by now you've heard the concerns of some of the court employees in reference to some of the security issues they're dealing with at the courthouse.
Yes, Judge Lamson and I have had a couple of really good discussions, and in fact, Judge Lamson and Mayor Alvey and I have had at least one discussion. So, yes.
I'm very pleased to hear that. I'm not so sure that we can't do more. I know we can always do more later. I'm not so sure we can't do more now. So you have my ear. Please engage me in reference to how we can help you and those that are in charge of security issues for all the employees and how we can best serve you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I can assure you, as an elected official, it's my intention as we move through, we get some more specific data, we get some concrete kinds of things to be sure that we're being thoughtful and intentional about if we are going to invest some dollars, how we're best going to invest them, to maximize that return on investment. And I assure you, I will be visiting with each of you, either one-on-one or two-on-one or some kind of way that we can do that legally and keep you apprised in what we're learning and what we're finding out. And I think right now we have a number of good options, I think, that are available that we're looking at.
Other comments or questions on this item? I just want to state that I am pleased to know that you've already made changes that you felt were needed and necessary, and that we're all looking together on how to find, analyze, understand, identify the changes yet to be made and the dollars to make them with on both your departments. Anything else? Yes.
I want to echo her comments. There was no question in my mind that the two of you are going to put your heads together for solutions on this. There was no question, and thank you.
Okay. Yes, anything else? Okay. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Last item.
All right, the last one on our agenda tonight, other than a look at the future workshops, is about the Kaw River levy, and it's one that we have what we believe is pretty good news. So I will turn this over to Assistant County Administrator Melissa Sieben to walk through where this project is, which we haven't had. We've had some discussion about it in these meetings, but we'll give a little update from there and financially. Melissa?
All right, well, Mayor and Commissioners, tonight I want to close with a positive story that we'll hope will even get more positive as the days and weeks continue. When I started here in 2015, I wasn't working on levies, and by 2016 I was, and I've spent quite a bit of time over the last couple of years trying to get into the weeds, and I've tried to distill this down into as short and succinct of a presentation to include the evening as possible. The levies that we are referring to are the Kansas City levies. They consist of 7 separate units on the Missouri and Kansas rivers, and they protect over 94,000 jobs and over 5,000 structures and $22 billion in investments in the Kansas City region. Everything has been completed on these systems but for the levees that are left in our community, which protect Armourdale and Argentine, and the West Bottoms and East Bottoms, as we'd like to just refer to them as the Bottoms, in Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. Just as a little historical reminder as to why this is particularly important, graduated high school this year, 1993. We saw some very scary moments along the Missouri River. And if you go back to 1951, those floods were actually impacting our community off the Kansas River. And the work that we have left to do is the Kansas River. So originally, starting back in 1993, work began on trying to get these systems improved as it was clear there was a need. And it took until 2007 for us to get authorization. However, as you see up here in my first bullet point, this was actually intended to always be one project, because if you did one part of it, it would impact the other. So though there are systems, units within the system, they really needed on the Kansas River in particular to be done at one time. Unfortunately, as noted here, due to cost control and other bureaucratic issues, phase 1 was authorized in 7 under an interim agreement, which was for Argentine area. And then it wasn't until just 2016 that we received authorization on Armourdale and what is CID, or the Bottoms. Unfortunately, though, through valiant effort of group of folks in this region led by MOARC, which is the Missouri and Other Affiliated Rivers Coalition, and Kansas City Industrial Council, Unified Government in Kansas City, Missouri, we were not able to get the language in there at that time that combined the projects. However, we did get a lot of traction going on that issue. So just here's a picture of what we're talking about that's remaining here. The river that's going through the most of the picture is obviously the Kaw, and then off to the far right northeast part of the slide there is the Missouri River. So what you'll see here is the remaining cost to complete the levees in this entire system along the Missouri and Kansas River. The Argentine amount is sitting at $88 million, and the Armourdale CID is sitting at $365 million, for a total of $453 million to complete the project. What this project consists of is a raising of the levees anywhere from approximately 2 to 5 feet, in addition to work on under seepage and pumps, which are very, very important to the residents and businesses in our community. And the cost breakdowns that we've seen put not only Kaw Valley Drainage District, but also the Unified Government in play, because we actually own some pumps that the Kaw Valley Drainage District doesn't own. So there's a lot of facts here that we could share, but just to let you know, our partners over at the City of Kansas City, Missouri, also are very interested and passed a bond issue about a year ago to help pay for this project. So not all is lost. Along comes the federal government's disaster bill of 2018, which we did not know anything about, and were just told about a week and a half ago that it was not only approved by the House and the Senate, but signed into law by the President of the United States. That was to fund $453 million for the Kansas City levees, along with about $13 billion in other projects around the United States. What happened is that phase 1, which is Argentine, that $88 million we were just talking about, was actually fully funded. This is unheard of. Okay, typically the cost shares that we are dealing with are a 35% local match. That 35% local match would have been broken down to a Kansas City, Kansas portion, a Kaw Valley portion, and a Kansas City, Missouri portion. And staff over the last year has actually been working to get percentage breakdowns and splits, which with each passing bit of news, things were getting better for us, but we were still going to have millions and millions of dollars that we would have to pay for this. So that full funding is legit, it's real, $88 million. We don't have to worry about a 35% match in any portion of that with those three other entities. However, what did happen is, if you'll note, back up in that other slide, we were split into two phases. So that big chunk, that $365 million chunk, is still sitting out there. It was also federally funded, however, with a large however, that there would be that cost share of 35%. But a nice little nuance to this was that the government, the federal government, would pay for it up front through construction, and then in the back end, the local partners would owe their 35% over a 30-year repayment plan, which we typically don't have access to. However, not all is lost. We believe that through some actions on our part that have been going on the last week and a half since we've known this, that there's some opportunity to possibly end this conversation, hopefully in the next few weeks, with we don't owe a dime. So the House and Senate have been working on a bill. It's called WRDA. It's the Water Resource Development Act of 2018. And through Jeff and I and the group of committed partners work this last spring, we're able to get the Senate to include language in the bill that helps us merge these two projects back to one. And the House, we hear, has tentatively agreed to add that language in. No matter what, there's a disconnect, so if it does go to conference committee, this is where we have the opportunity to get these two projects back together. It also means that this bill has become very critical to us, because if we do get them merged, that means we don't owe a dime. So you may be hearing from us to help push through the funding of Armourdale and the CID projects. And we wanted to let you know, though, huge win. We don't have any part of $88 million in Argentine. And we do have a major save if we aren't able to finish this on that $365 million amount. Our 35% would not be owed with our partners until some point after the completion of construction. And best case scenario, it would be 10 years from start. And we are just starting construction phase on Argentine, which you can see that authorization was in 2006. And we would be able to go faster on Armourdale and CID because the dollars are there. Often with the federal projects, you'll get an authorization to do a project, but you don't get the actual funding authorization. They come separately. So the money's all there. The word go is what we've been told. Now we want to try to close that legislative loophole that's been created and hopefully get these projects into one.
So Melissa, who pushed this $88 million funding through locally for Kansas?
Okay, so the budget, the 2018 disaster bill, we were not actually involved in that with more KCIC or any of the cities. What did happen was that the Army Corps was reached out to here locally and asked very specifically what projects what was the dollar value remaining on the Kansas City levy projects. They gave them that information, and then this was included. So I can't tell you why this particular project was fully authorized with funding through the federal government, but what I can tell you is that, sorry, was that a bad answer?
I was just curious who was looking out for us finally.
Well,
somebody is looking
clearly the work that we've been doing locally with our federal delegation has convinced them of what is the need. And I can tell you that the Kansas representation at the federal level has been very open to taking our meetings, very interested in what this all means to their constituents. So it's a huge sign that the work we're doing here is something of value.
And they're listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fantastic way to end a meeting that was long but productive. Thank you so much for the information.
I would probably add to
Commissioner Bynum?
all the work that Melissa has done, along with Jeff and everybody on the staff, and keeping the Corps informed, the educational process and ongoing. When they come to ask those questions, if we hadn't been so involved for the last couple of years,
Right.
we would not have been that successful. So,
And Mayor Alvey,
relationship with KCMO.
I appreciate all of Mayor Alvey, you had wanted to comment there and close us out,
Yes,
maybe?
Sure. So I actually am in Washington, D.C. with the American Public Power Association Policymakers Council, and we will be meeting with the Kansas delegation tomorrow, and we will bring this issue to them. And also we are trying to get meetings with Congressman Cleaver on the Missouri side to bring this issue to his attention, and hopefully we can get this included and moved on on the House side.
Thank you so much. That's great. Anything else you want to say before we close out?
No,
Mayor?
thank you.
Okay, good night. Doug?
Future workshops, you see we've added a couple on here. We had a request on NBR funding and livable neighborhood staffing to have that as a discussion. I believe that was one's change. You'll also note we've slated an executive session on Thursday. If we have time, we'll do that and going through that with the mayor. If not, we will push that to Monday. As we get to Monday, we'll bring back information on the benefit districts, and then I think several topics that we talked about today will need to come back and summarize somehow to work on for a yellow sheet, which Commissioner Burrows, a yellow sheet is kind of our summative statement of the pluses and negatives, so I may seek a little more information on that as we move through Thursday. And then we'll go over on Monday night also approval of any ordinances or resolutions that we'll be approving on Thursday, and anticipate if we have any edits or clerical corrections to the budget, though the budget staff has not told me we have any, so maybe it was 650 perfect pages this year.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we are adjourned.